G'day guys, welcome back to another video. Today we are going to talk about the world's strongest weapon. Now when I say world's strongest weapon, you're probably thinking about a nuclear bomb or atomic bomb or some sort of that kind of thing, but it's in fact the strongest weapon in the world is the US dollar. So I think it's important to go through this topic to understand exactly the functionality of the world's reserve currency, which is the US dollar, the gold standard, and the Petrodollar agreement, and the QE phase that we're going through at the moment, and we have been going through for quite some time, and what's going to happen next with it. So firstly, to begin with, how did US dollar even happen and become to what it is today? The first chapter of this video is the Bretton Woods agreement. Now, after World War I in 1945, when all the other countries around the world were suffering from financial losses because of the World War, America was the only country that was actually prospering, which was due to their mass production of the weapons that were supplied during the World War II. They were essentially supplying all the equipment and all the weaponry to go fight the opposite side. So what happened, because due to that, America after the World War II finished was the strongest country, both financially and militarily, and all the other reasons why a country becomes a superpower. Therefore, they decided that US dollar was obviously the strongest currency, and being the strongest country, had the most amount of gold as well in the world. All the other countries were depleted of gold because of the financial losses. They didn't have any other gold. The only country that had a lot of gold was America. So what America proposed through Bretton Woods agreement was that gold will be, which is known as the gold standard, gold will be measured as a unit of currency. For example, probably in those time of the days, they probably thought about 1 ounce of gold will be a certain amount of money. So say for example, I don't know, 1 ounce of gold might be worth 35, maybe $45, just depending on what they had decided within the Bretton Woods agreement. Now, but where the US dollar comes is that the gold was the standard unit of measurement, but what America said was that because no one else has gold, we're going to have to have some sort of receipts. So it's sort of like a barter system, right? When you get some sort of, you give someone gold and they give you a certain amount of receipt. That receipt is US dollar. So through Bretton Woods agreement, proposed that the US dollar will be pegged to gold, which will give US dollar the value for the amount of gold they have in their reserve, which was about a huge amount of gold. It would have been 10, maybe 20,000 metric tons, just depending on, no one actually knows exact figure, but there would have been a certain amount of thousands of metric tons of gold that they would have had in their reserve, through which they pegged their US dollar to the gold, and all the other currencies like the pound, the euro, the yen, and all the other currencies in the world would all be pegged to the US dollar, which were indirectly pegged to the gold, because the US dollar was pegged to the gold, which is what gave all the other currencies the power and the monetary system to go out and spend money. Because what happened was, this phase brought two important factors within this whole situation, which was US established two main pillars. Firstly was international support, because they knew that they were the strongest country at the time, so they knew that they had international support from everybody, from the global order. And secondly was the gold standard. These two things combined made US dollar the superior currency and the gold reserve that it is today. But what happened, just like everything else around the world, US started a fight with the country started the Vietnamese War, and because of the Vietnamese War, they were depleted of gold, because they needed a certain amount of gold to be withdrawn from, or to be to be sold, so that they can this gold was probably being sold to other countries so they can print more money, or print issue treasury bills or bonds, etc. So whatever they did during that time in 1965, 1970s, they were depleted of gold, so they didn't have any more gold. So Richard Nixon, at the time of that depletion of gold, Richard Nixon was the President of the United States, and he decided and announced that gold will no longer be used as an instrument to measure the value of a currency. That simply means that US dollar will not be pegged to gold anymore. Which brings me to chapter 2, which is the Petrodollar Agreement. Now, Petrodollar Agreement was another classic move by US to make US dollar to hold their position as the strongest country in the world, but also hold their position, the US dollar's position as the supreme currency in the world, to be the reserve currency. What happened within the Petrodollar Agreement was that in 1970s, like I said, US and UK found together that they had a certain amount of oil reserves within the Middle Eastern countries, but the Middle Eastern countries weren't qualified or advanced enough to understand how to extract that oil out of those refineries. So US offered and UK offered that they have the technology, they will be fishing at the gold, the black gold, as people say, in the 21st century oil, and that oil will obviously, the Middle East will benefit from it. But with that also, US decided that instead of having, like I said, in the international support, which they already had, and gold, they decided that the gold, instead of that, at the same time, they dismantled the pegging of gold, and they replaced it with something called the Petrodollar Agreement, because of which the oil around the world will be only traded with US dollar, because again, it was one of the strongest currency. It had the international support. It's like saying me giving you a currency that I made myself and telling you, go buy me 4 apples. No one's going to give you 4 apples because no one has confidence in that currency. The latest example of something like this is Bitcoin. No one had confidence into Bitcoin early days when it launched. Now more people are investing into it. It's an asset because more people have believed into it, and more people have given it support and has given it legitimacy as being something to be used for a barter transaction. Simply said, that's exactly what the US dollar was doing. Within the Petrodollar Agreement, everybody said that, okay, US said that you want oil because everything operates on oils, your factories, industrials, cars, vehicles, everything operates on oil. They said if you want oil, it's only going to be possible for you to buy oil if you trade with the US dollar, which again made US dollar the reserve currency it is today. But why this is important, and why and how US manipulates other countries into getting the best out of them, is simply that's the role that they play as a superpower, is the fact that they control SWIFT, they control the World Bank, they controlled IMF, they essentially control everything, because US dollar is the global currency. With SWIFT you get a SWIFT code if you want to transfer money internationally. SWIFT is, I think, Society of World Banking Financial Transaction, something like that. That's the full form. And they provide you, every bank has a SWIFT code that you use to transfer money into a different country, which is called an overseas transaction. That is only possible. How it works is that if you want to transfer money from Australia to, say, Japan, because you've gone to travel, you've run out of money, your mum transfers you some money, the money will be transferred from Australian dollars. No, it wouldn't be. It'd be transferred into US dollars and will be converted into yen later on, which is the Japanese currency, which US takes full advantage of, because they will be fluctuating the amount of money that is within the market. So any given time, if your mom transfers Australian dollars and US is like, no more US dollars will be transferred anymore, because that's the only currency that Japan will take the money in, because they're not going to, what are they going to use the Australian dollar for? Or you don't have, your mum wouldn't have yens, so how are your mum going to transfer, yen to the country that you're in, that you're stuck in, to have fun, to drink, and blah blah blah. So the US can essentially block your mom's transaction. It's so weird saying this, but yeah, US can essentially fluctuate the market. They hold the cards to it. They can decide how much money is being printed and how much money isn't. So they decide at any given time how much money will be available within the markets to keep the US dollar as a strong currency, because it's implied simple universal principle, which is supply and demand. The higher the demand and the lower the supply, the more the value that thing will have. So that is chapter 3, by the way, that how US controls all the monetary systems around the world. That is one example. If you think about it, the whole Russian-Ukraine war, how US really tried to pressurize Russia was through blocking their US money, which they have in treasury bills through US, and they can do the same with everybody else, because a lot of the countries have bought treasury bills which are built off US dollar, and they have a lot of the money stuck in US dollar, so essentially they control the all amount of money. Chapter 4 of this video is to understand the repercussions of this point, which is printing money, which in a lot of money being printed can also cause, and is causing, and will keep doing so, QE, which is known as quantitative easing. Quantitative easing may sound very fancy and may sound extremely something that is, out of your reach to understand, but trust me, it isn't. If I can understand, anyone can. QE, quantitative easing, essentially just means that there is been excessive amount of printing of money, which is the US dollar, in the market because of COVID, because of, going into recession, but main factor being COVID, because US came out with multiple stimulus packages and they were printing a lot of money, which boosted, again, there was a lot of the supply in the market and there wasn't that much demand, but people were still flushing out money, giving people who are, laid off, or people who couldn't work for whatever reason, they were getting stimulus packages in the form of money, which again, the amount of supply within the market was huge and the demand was so-so, or people would just get money because it's free money. Who wouldn't want free money? Which caused QE, which is known as quantitative easing. Like I said, how that works is when there is excessive amount of money in the market, which means that the market is quite liquid, there are going to be a lot of money who are going to be spending this money as well within the same market to buy an asset, to buy a car, to buy whatever they like. Within QE, what happens is if you spend that money wisely into an asset, being Bitcoin, stocks, houses, whatever, the value of the houses or the asset jacks up once you keep printing more money, because that asset is scarce. Bitcoin is scarce, real estate is scarce. As we've seen in Australia, there's only a certain amount of houses and people have used, bought those houses and they have shot up in value because of the fact that there is excessive amount of supply of money, but there is no monetary way, there is no system in place to actually control and allocate that value of the money that like they used to be, which is called the gold standard, because during gold standard there only used to be a certain amount of money in the market. Now there is a whole lot of more money in the market, which is not being accounted for, which isn't pegged to anything, and therefore the value of that money has gone down. So the value of what you could get, for example, the soft serve that you buy today for $1.50 used to be 30 cents at one time, used to be 50 cents, then it became 70, 80 cents, and now it is $1 or whatever it is at the moment. So you're saying that there is a certain amount of inflation in the market, which is good for businesses, but this inflation has obviously now, the inflation has gone to a whole new level, and we have entered a phase of quantitative easing, which, like I explained, this drops the value of the money. So the items that you could buy for $1, or the house that was at one point people could afford for $500,000 is now $1.5 to $2 million. That is because of the simple concept called QE. That is because government is printing more and more money, and the demand for that money is obviously still there, but the value isn't, because there is an endless supply of the money. It's not pegged to anything, which is causing huge amount of upsets, because the Fed in America decides that they're going to print as much money as possible. That's why you may have heard of this phrase, which is called, when US sneezes, the whole world catches a flu, which happened again in 2008. 2008 brings me to another point, which is in 2008 when the government knew that they had to bail out all the big firms, because of what they had done, they started printing money. That was the first phase of QE, when they started printing money and they didn't really pay off their debt. This is a whole new video. Actually, I'll make more content about this, but to understand within this video, it's important to understand all these 4 chapters: the Bretton Woods agreement, Petrodollar agreement, how the US dollar controls the world in different monetary ways, and how they use other countries, you know, to essentially they can drop anyone's economy at whatever time, whatever way they want. And chapter 4, which is printing money. Now it brings me to my last point here, which is chapter 5, which is a counter to the US dollar, which is BRICS. You may or may not have heard of this name. BRICS is just essentially a consortium, a group of different countries. The first country is Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. These are the, you know, after the G7, the strongest Western countries in the world. These are some of the most dominant powers in the world, which actually stack up to some of the Western countries now in terms of GDPs. China obviously being the global manufacturing hub of the world, and Brazil, Russia, and South Africa also doing their part to contribute to the world's economy. They have decided that they're going to come together and they're going to create another currency, which is going to be called a R5 currency, which they haven't really spoken much about, but it is an exact counter to the US dollar, which is what the US is afraid about, and they don't want anyone challenging their reserve currency because of the simple reasons of them being able to manipulate the entire world. And why wouldn't you? Because if you're the strongest person, that's what you do within the global map. Okay, so that sums up the entire video, and I hope you understand how US dollar works around the world and how it became the reserve currency of the world, and what is going to happen in future with BRICS. I'll go into more detail within a separate video, but I hope this information was useful to you and you understand how different things work, especially QE, which is quantitative easing. Again, like I would like to iterate, it is something so important to understand. We are always blaming different, you know, factors to understand how the market is, you know, where it is within the housing market in Australia, but we don't understand a simple fact, which is QE. The main reason why we are suffering, the main reason why there is a huge amount of disparity between the prices from where it used to be and where they are now, is simply because, well, there are multiple other factors, but the main reason is QE, which is printing of excessive money. People don't understand this and they blame, you know, immigration and different laws and investors who are investing more money, and smartly they're investing it. Do not blame them at all. This is something important to understand and to be talked about, instead of all the other propagandas that have been going out. So I hope you understand this video and I hope you liked it. So please like, share, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks.